So what I'd like to start by doing is to tell you that please be interactive, provide your views, help in the discussion, and help me also to be sure that we address issues that are relevant for you. So feel confident. I have a number of things that we have prepared for that, but we don't have to cover them all, but we need to cover all your needs if you are kind enough to share them with us. And one of the things that we have thought, if you can agree with that, is if you could help us identify what are the best ways to get you to sleep when you attend a conference, right? Please remember occasions when you felt like sleeping, and what was that? Why was that? Would you like to share some experiences and views? What can get you to sleep, please?
The safest way to put someone to sleep is if you read from your slide, just read the text, and there needs to be a lot of text on the slide, and then that you don't raise your voice. This is also very good.
That's right.
So in order to put you to sleep.
So you're talking not only about overcrowding your slides,
But just read it word
you
by
are
word.
reading word by word, and so this is one point. And on the other one, you're talking about the voice. Gert, would you like to expand on that? How do you believe that we should use it?
I always speak with the same tone if I tell you about rheumatoid arthritis, which is a very significant disease that needs to be treated continuously. I think
This is in the views of, the very early courses that I attended with Reg. He had a very nice quote from a medical student that, impersonated what Gerd was now presenting as a teacher. And the quote said, a teacher is someone who speaks during your sleep. So let's say you can come to that point, particularly if the voice is, let's say, monotonous, right? You're always in the same tone. And some people, I don't know, because they are shy or they feel that it's more educated, they tend to speak rather low, right? It's quite a problem. So I believe that really trying to avoid that monotonous voice, particularly if typically the rooms are rather dark. Not rare. Are you listening to talk just after a meal? And all of it is rather dreadful, right? And it can get you to sleep. I agree with that. And you can typically, let's say in big rooms at least, you can adjust the intensity of the amplifying system. So if you come earlier on, test that, make sure that you don't move away from your microphone, because that's also an issue, right? Sometimes it can take you to sleep or can be annoying that sometimes you can listen, sometimes you can't listen because the person moved and the sound is not with you anymore. So you need to make sure that everyone can listen in an intensity of sound that is enough to keep you understanding what people are saying, so that you're invoked by the meaning instead of being invoked to sleep by just the tone and the monotonous sounds that you have behind it. That's a very important point. Now, regarding the having the slides overcrowded or having too many slides in your talk, sometimes the speaker, in order to overcome that, achieves a high speed of speech. Does this make you sleepy, or does this really get you going because this is a race, so let's try to... How do you feel about that? You lose contact. I think that's the most important concept. Sometimes the speakers seem to think that if they speak fast, that people will be excited about it, but after a while you're not running after anything because you can't understand what the topic is. The concepts are running at a pace that you cannot follow it anymore. Let's say you can engage people in fast conversation as long as you don't detach too much from what they already know, and you can, let's say, they can follow your reasoning. But we need always to be aware as speakers that you are trying, that your audience makes connections between concepts that hopefully are frequently new to them. You have been working on them for ages, right? Sometimes you're presenting your PhD work. You now summarize it after 3 or 4 years of work, and you expect the audience to be able to grasp it in 5 minutes. You're telling that you feel that yourself, you're probably very stupid. Took you 4 years to understand the damn thing, and now you're trying to convey it in 5 minutes and expect people to be able to grasp it, right? So we need to be, I think, very clear about how much we can say and how related people are to that, right? It's a crucial thing, I believe, you know. One of the aspects also that I believe gets me to sleep are the other reasons why I cannot follow the speaker. Namely, for instance, if the topic is too well known to me, okay, so there's nothing new in it, or if the topic is so hard that I can't follow, so I can't understand the person, you know. I confess, for instance, this is a difficulty. It's certainly, Gert, you do not have, because you have so much of your experience in basic science as well. But I find myself in difficulties of attending conferences on basic science because I don't know enough to follow one presentation and the next presentation and the next presentation. Quite frequently, I drift away because, you know, I can't follow that. They don't give me the time to understand the basic principles to be able to talk to them. So they are talking at me. And, you know, for that reason, of course, I drift away and I will sleep or move to some other talk. So establishing these communication bases. If I really want to interact with you, I need to make sure that we have a common language to start with. It's, you know, I think that image of the dictionary, you're trying me to learn a new word and you only use words that I don't know, you know, so how can I follow you, right? So you need to, let's say, go from what I already know, and then we'll try to build it up so that I can hopefully follow you. And that's, I think, a very important issue to keep people awake, meaning they need to be interested anyway. Other aspects that will get you to sleep or avoid you to getting to sleep without enthusiasm. Without enthusiasm. What do you mean by that? Can you explain your point of view?
I have one example. For instance, I can say to my students, today our topic is systemic vasculitis. However, I don't like this topic, but I have to read this lecture.
So, why don't you follow me into my misery? Right? You have to fake it. You should fake it. I do agree with you. Let's say presenting questions to the audience is certainly relevant, but I take that as one of the most difficult, let's say, strategies to use. You need to really be acquainted with it because you may lose your audience with questions. One of the ways that you may lose your audience is because the question is too basic, right? Let's say if you are a rheumatologist and I ask you, are you aware of you know, the concept of systemic vasculitis? You feel insulted by that, right? So I can put you off because it's too basic. Good?
And one trick to do this, you can say, well, I'm here today and I'm supposed to talk about systemic vasculitis, and before preparing my talk, I thought this was completely boring, I hated this subject, and I would never like to speak about it. But when going into the details, I found it most exciting. I can't believe how exciting this is, and now I will tell you about the interesting cases that I came across, and then the audience said, oh, yes, because they also thought initially a completely boring subject.
Right.
And now you say, I found it too, but now...
It's a very interesting strategy because, again, it's giving you what's in it for me, what's in it for you, and this is something I managed to do, you know, over the past 3 or 4 days, so you can do it as well. I'm now really excited about the topic, and I didn't like it at all a few days ago, right? So let's say something I can do. You have something I also want, right? I want the same as her, or the same as him, right? One of the difficulties about making questions, I think, when you're dealing with a group, which you typically are, is, let's say, placing it at the right level of difficulty. If it's too difficult, people will feel frightened. If it's too easy, people will feel insulted or disrespected. And so one of the strategies that most of us use is that you kind of grasp your audience. You start with a relatively easy question and you see how they react. One of the issues, on the other hand, is also that we can ask on different ways. Let us say, for instance, that we have a group here and I say, oh, you, would you mind telling me, the basic aspects of Hernock-Schoen lines, because we're talking about vasculitis. Or I come to you and say, would you mind telling me what your views are? The basic characteristics of Hernock-Schoen lines. How did you feel more comfortable? When I was back there? Is it so? All right. Is it so? If I pointed at you, okay? Let's say, maybe you're hoping that, not me, huh? Right? Yeah. Let's say there are hundreds of people around you that say, oh, he's not pointing at me. But if I'm pointing at you, blah, 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 right? It's a different thing. If I come closer to you, let's say I kind of support you on that, right? The idea that I have my eyes on yours is less threatening and less if I'm looking angry, but it supports that. And I must be prepared as well for the kind of answers that I may get. If it's a very clever answer, right? If you respond really well, I think that I should celebrate that. Am I right? Good. Great, that's just fine. That's wonderful that you managed to identify those two. And would you mind telling us how you reached that kind of knowledge? That's brilliant. And so I'm inviting you to show also not only your strategy, but your joy, that you learned something and I'm trying to engage the other ones in the rest. Well, let's say that I really get a stupid answer, right? How do you manage that? That's one of the of the worst fears of the teacher or the speaker, right? Do you have any tricks that you use in your practice?
Yeah, that's a possibility. But when you think about it, it's probably more likely that this then you drift away, because it depends. If you talk to students and they didn't prepare well, it could be obvious that.
Yeah.
But if you do it to a general audience at a rheumatology conference, you don't want to insult anyone.
No, absolutely not.
Say something completely stupid, and then you say, well, it's a possibility, I thought about this too, but I guess it's more likely that we move along these lines, and then and maybe if the colleague next to you has some additional ideas,
right.
And then all of a sudden, you would say, I would never say, well, this is completely wrong, how could you ever
right.
answer?
Absolutely.
Apparently you don't understand this.
Any other tricks that you use? You want to share? You don't want to share?
Yes.
Come on.
Close, but not. Somebody else?
Somebody else? Okay. Let's say my couple of pocket tricks is something like that. Would you mind explaining your reasoning? See that? So let's say the answer is wrong, totally wrong. Would you mind explaining your reasoning behind that? Can you expand on that? Typically the student or the person, while they explain why they were thinking like that, they come to the conclusion themselves that they were wrong. And actually they are also making a very useful thing. They are revising concepts around the concept that we are dealing with, you see? It's not only you that you're teaching, you say, would you mind explaining that? Well, I thought this because blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, but now that you say it, it's probably not. Yeah, I realize this is not probably the right thing. And sometimes let's say another trick is if something is totally wrong, I use one trick that I learned with Reg, actually, a few years ago, and this was, thank you for bringing that up. It gives me the opportunity of correcting a very common wrong assumption, right? So thank you for that. I'm not making you stupid, right? But I'm saying, well, that's a very good opportunity for us to correct. It's a common misconception. So let's say I'm giving you my hand and saying, well, it's not totally stupid, but I arrange ways of dealing with it. And I think, again, you need or you want to keep your audience involved, engaged with you, and I think all those tricks are important. Sometimes teachers and speakers feel a little bit offended by the idea that you are doing a performance when you're making a presentation, but would you feel uncomfortable with that concept, that you are making a performance? Do we agree with that? Let's say should be a well-supported performance. But in my view, adopting that idea that you are selling something, you're selling your time, you're selling your prestige, you're selling the concept, you're selling the enthusiasm. You're always trying to convince people that it's worthwhile for them to be there, right? And so I think that if we accept that, that's fine. It's for a good reason, right?
As long as you make an honest impression.
Absolutely, absolutely. Always.
I think the audience will recognize.
No, absolutely.
That you're just selling stuff that you.
Absolutely. And you know, being honest is one of the key ingredients to success, to long-term success here. Let's say, even in a simple talk, if you, let's say, are faced with the question that you don't know the answer, how should you deal with that? Quite frequently, people will invent something, right? I'll say they will guess. They will, let's say, explore the concept. And I think it's only fair and it's well accepted that you say, I haven't thought about it, right? I don't have a good answer for that. I will think about it, right? And I think that most of the audiences will accept that as a good, let's say, it's a sign of honesty, again, right? So you are more reliable on other aspects.
Somebody is asking, say, oh, this is a good point. Can you talk please about, can you tell us just a few words about this aspect?
Yeah.
Do you know more?
Much more experience than me.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
to admit this,
Just
for
fine.
example, the video that you showed, the last one
Yeah.
before, so it would be much better if the teacher would have said, so please tell us what you think.
Oh, does anyone around know? Do you have another answer? But you know, say, even in your attitude, I think one of the things we need to avoid is the idea that if you're going to address a topic, you should know everything about it. No one knows everything. And what about things that irritate you? Because it's another way of drifting the audience from the speaker, right? If you feel irritated, then you just move away from that. So, you start thinking about something else. Sorry? If the speaker is not competent, right? Oh, go home. Right? If you feel that, so this person doesn't know what they're talking about. Do you agree with that? That's the typos on the presentation. Yeah, that's irritating as well. What is the background feeling when you know there are too many typos?
Anxiety.
You feel anxious because of that?
Compulsive. I am compulsive.
Yeah.
Because impolite. Because
Impolite.
It didn't spend enough time.
Absolutely. I feel that's, you know, I think it dominates my feeling as well. It is an issue of respect. How much time did they spend on this? Was he careful or not? The same thing, for instance, as presenting an old slide, which is already 10 years old, obviously dated in time, and you didn't care to update it, although there was something irrelevant, right, that you didn't do it. It's one issue of respect, so lack of respect one way or another. Like, you know, the same thing is when someone comes to you and talks about their view and makes you feel that all the audience is ignorant and stupid, you know, and I'm coming here to, let's say, bestow my wisdom upon you, right? And so this is something also that I think takes the audience away. You need to be closer to that. Confidence. I think it's important. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you appear arrogant, this is the worst thing.
I think it's the worst thing to do. And if you appear also too frightened, am I right, Gert? If you, it's also bad, right? If you don't show confidence at all.
Everyone has sympathy for you being nervous. Because
Yes.
many actors are nervous, then it's fine. But if you're sort of frightened, that's
Does any one of you today still feel nervous when you make presentations?
of course, hopefully.
Do you feel nervous? You also do? Difficult with English, right? Okay. Do you have any tricks for that? You have a trick,
Yeah.
please? Yeah.
It's not me presenting in English.
Oh,
It's like I'm doing theater. So in fact, I present better in English than in Spanish because in my own language, it's like I should be much better than that. But in English, it's okay. I'm in Spanish. And
all right.
I can go in.
So yeah, okay. I say there are a number of tricks that you can find even on the web. Dr. Google is very good in giving you suggestions on that. But it has a lot to do with posture as well. You see, let's say, posture is not only something that you do to impress people, it impresses you as well, right? Actually, there is a very strong demonstration, for instance, that smiling improves your humor, right? Even if you do it on purpose. I say, try that. If you are, let's say, a perfectionist and rather neurotic person like I am, and when you're going to bed at night and you have all these worries in your head and you're feeling very, very worried about it, try just smiling. You know, try to make it as Duchenne as possible. And actually, it's very hard for you to keep bad thoughts in your mind while you're smiling. And I believe that actually, and actually there is evidence for that, that your mind is reading that. Right? So it's not only your mind affecting your posture, it is affected by your posture. So you can find a lot of evidence on that, science, on what is called power posture, right? So things like, I am now the next speaker, and I am called upon, and I go and I look at you, right, and I stay like that. Or if I raise here and I consciously can decide you're now going to be called, you be proud of yourself, right? So you raise high and tall, straight to the podium. Okay, I never know I'm right, I'm here, and I have my shoulders back and I have my head high, okay, and I look at you in the eyes. This will also influence me, not only you, and it will allow that. And also here, the smile has been proven to work, right? If I smile at you, and it helps me to be a little bit more relaxed. But of course, there are a number of tricks that you have to adapt to yourself, please.
Start with something that you're comfortable with. So that is very important. Nothing can go wrong. Let's say, so if Roberto's from Spain, from Madrid, you can say, well, I'm so happy that Real Madrid just beat Bavarian Munich. I'm sorry for the German speakers, but I mean, they did a great job and stuff. Something like this, and everyone, then you already have caught the attention of the audience with something completely confident, and then you go into the other thing, or you start with an anecdote.
Absolutely.
So when on my way to the plane, I noticed that this and this. So then you know that nothing can go wrong with this usually, because you are completely familiar with it. And then you enter the more difficult area, but then you've already lost quite a bit of your nerves.
Humor is very important on that if you feel comfortable with it. But there's always one type of humor that no one takes badly. One of the reasons why we are worried about humor is because if you have several cultures in the room, you may feel, well, maybe they don't find this so funny and so. But there is a kind of humor that everyone will take lightly, and that's a joke about you. Right? If you play about you, you kind of diminish the stakes. And you get yourself closer to the audience, you see? So it's much closer to that. I remember being in front of a huge audience, and I didn't expect that to be so crowded. And the wonderful speaker, I'll show you some slides of him in a moment, started by saying, we were in Portugal, and he started by saying to these 1,200 people, I was a Scotsman. I've always craved for sunshine, so it's so good to be here in Lisbon. And so in that moment, I was feeling a little bit nervous of my speech, and I had the joke in my mind. And when I came up, I said, as a Portuguese, I've always craved for Scotch. And so we are okay, right? So you do a joke like that, and people laugh a little bit, and you have a little bit of time, and so you find yourself, making that. You can make a joke about, being a professor, about, never mind, professors talk during your sleep. If you're a professor yourself, that's fine. No one will get insulted. If you're not, let's say you should not make jokes about someone else, but if you do about you, it's just fine. And it always goes well, I think, and it's a useful thing. So I would move forward a little bit, because I was now going to ask you ways of engaging you. And we'll come back to this, but I'd like to show you a video clip. And could you please look at it as I invited you to? If you're looking at a talk, look at now for the technique, the methodology that the speaker is using to engage you or to get you astray. Let's see if you like it or not. But try to look at the methodology more than the let's say, the content itself.
About 10 years ago, I took on the task to teach global development to Swedish undergraduate students. That was after having spent about 20 years together with African institutions studying hunger in Africa. So I was sort of expected to know a little about the world. And I started in our medical university, Karolinska Institute, an undergraduate course called Global Health. But when you get that opportunity, you get a little nervous. I thought these students coming to us actually have the highest grade you can get in Swedish college system. So I thought maybe they know everything I'm going to teach them about. So I did a pre-test when they came. And one of the questions from which I learned a lot was this one: which country has the highest child mortality of these 5 pairs? And I put them together so that in each pair of country, one has twice the child mortality of the other. And this means that it's much bigger the difference than the uncertainty of the data. I won't put you at a test here, but it's Turkey, which is highest there, Poland, Russia, Pakistan, and South Africa. And these were the results of the Swedish students. I did it, so I got a confidence interval, which was pretty narrow, and I got happy, of course. I had 1.8 right answer out of 5 possible. And that means that there was a place for a professor of international health and for my course. But one late night, when I was compiling the report, I really realized my discovery. I have shown that Swedish top students know statistically significantly less about the world than the chimpanzees. Because the chimpanzee would score half right. If I gave them 2 bananas with Sri Lanka and Turkey, they would be right half of the cases. But the students are not there. The problem for me was not ignorance, it was preconceived ideas. I did also an unethical study of the professors of the Karolinska Institute that hands out the Nobel Prize in medicine, and they are on par with the chimpanzee there. So this is where I realized that there was really a need to communicate, because the data of what's happening in the world and the child health of every country is very well aware. So we did this software which displays it like this. Every bubble here is a country. This country over here is, this is China. And this is India. The size of the bubble is the population. And on this axis here, I put fertility rate. Because my students, what they said when they looked upon the world, and I asked them, what do you really think about the world? Huh? Well, I first discovered that the textbook was Tintin mainly. And they said the world is still we and them. And we is Western world, and them is third world. And what do you mean with Western world? I said, well, that's long life in small family. And third world is short life in large family. So this is what I could display here. I put fertility rate here, number of children per woman, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to about 8 children per woman. We have very good data since 1962, 1960 about, on the size of families in all countries. The error margin is narrow. Here I put life expectancy at birth, from 30 years in some countries up to about 70 years. And 1962, there was really a group of countries here that was industrialized countries, and they had small families and long lives. And these were the developing countries. They had large families and they had relatively short lives. Now, what has happened since 1962? We want to see the change. Are the students right? It's still 2 types of countries? Or have these developing countries got smaller families and they live here? Or have they got longer lives and live up there? Let's see. We start the world. And this is all UN statistic that has been available. Here we go. Can you see there? It's China. They're moving against better health. They're improving there. All the green Latin American countries, they are moving towards smaller families. The yellow ones here are the Arabic countries, and they get larger families, but longer lives, but not larger families. The Africans are the green down here. They still remain here. This is India. Indonesia is moving on pretty fast. And in the 80s here, you have Bangladesh still among the African countries there. But now Bangladesh, it's a miracle that happens in the 80s. The imams start to promote family planning, and they move up into that corner. And in 90s, we have the terrible HIV epidemic that takes down the life expectancy of the African countries, and all the rest of the world moves up into the corner where we have long lives and small family, and we have a completely new world.
you'd comment on this. Do you find it was an effective presentation? Wasn't it? Right? Why was that? How did he achieve that? What were the tricks that he used that you can identify? Any ideas?
He was making fun of general beliefs, including himself.
Absolutely, right?
It's not bored.
That's a very good point. Who he actually, let's say, he is a member of Karolinska Institute, and he makes a joke about the Karolinska Institute professors, right? So he brings himself to the level of the audience without a problem. Also, when he raised that issue of misconceptions, do you see any kind of intention that he may have on his mind? Could he be enhancing the need? Let's say he has an audience that probably has no interest whatsoever in the global health, right? How can he plant that? Can I make yourself responsible for Turkey or India if you're not related to that? But maybe then I can pose you and enhance your need for information because I make you feel ignorant, right? Because that's what he did with the students there. Most of us would actually recognize, I don't think that, Turkey is better than whatever from that point of view. So let's say you enhance the, let's say you highlight the ignorance and you make your students feel that they need to know more, right? To go a little bit further, even if it's not something of their direct interest. It's intellectual curiosity, intellectual, how would I say it, not insecurity, but you don't feel safe anymore, right? Because you're confronted with something that you didn't know and that you might know as well. Someone like him will have prepared a presentation so that the projection is relatively low, so that he can have his hands on it and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Isn't it? For instance, when he is moving from one side to the other and saying the number of children in the family, you can go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. You immediately notice what that means. Instead of saying, well, the horizontal axis is the number of children per family. Right. This is very aseptic, right? And then he goes there. Did you notice also the tone of his voice? As he gets closer to, let's say, the apex of the presentation, he starts building up the speed, the tone, right, to the moment that it looks like someone describing a football game on the radio, right? And he's so excited about it, right? So again, did he convey joy in what he knows? For sure, right? This is a man that is happy for knowing what he knows, and he believes it's important, right, to do that. Another issue that I feel is very important on his way of presenting is that he got pretty fast to the core of the matter. Don't you agree? Sometimes many of the speakers take so long just introducing the topic. It's a cultural thing. In Portugal, certainly, people can't talk about the rain today without, going through 10 years of the weather change or whatever. But in other countries, not so much like that. But frequently, I think it's a very good technique if you manage to get your audience to the point, to the core, in 2 or 3 slides, 2 or 3 minutes, no more than that. This is where I'm focusing here. And he followed the concept of general, and then was focused on his students till he brought us to the longevity and dimension of the families, and these are the 2 dimensions that I'm comparing here today. Did he show any relationship between him and the topic? Immediately in the beginning, do you agree? When he says, I had been working for 20 years with African countries, and I happen to be interested on this, and I hope that I had something to teach. There was a room for a course on global health because the students were so ignorant. So I'm showing all the relevance of the information I'm bringing you. And it's a very short time, and he gets down to it using humor as well. I think this is really a brilliant talk. Now, one of the issues that I'd like to, I think might be interesting also, is to tell you about the José's presentation on presentations. And what I told you that I had been through a presentation and I was not satisfied with it and I changed it overnight was actually the truth. And to start with, I, let's say, adopted the spontaneous tendency that we have to present everything, to be a scholar, to give you a complete list of the topics. And so when I went to the web and tried to organize my own thoughts, I would end up with enormous lists of points, of bullet points, all of them perhaps important, but they would be boring to death if I brought you all of that. So over here, I was still in that mood of trying to be complete more than convincing, right? And actually, you know, when I arrived here yesterday, or this early morning, really, it was about one, right? And this was not a very good slide, and I was actually thinking to myself, here I am going to present a talk on how to do good talks, and I'm using a lousy one. And you know, you have to overcome that, and sometimes you have to allow yourself the time to go through, to mature that, and then to be able to come to the focus and say, the most important thing is not that I give you every single bullet point, is that hopefully I may invite you to go and look for more, and that you feel that the topic is important, and then you can learn it by yourself. And this is what I decided to do, and changed it so that it could be more captivating. So you're always trying, of course, to make it interesting for people who are listening. And then I'd like to share with you as well some topics about the building of slides. And I'll share some slides. This is from the chap I told you, the one that was always craving for sunshine. And so here's showing how COX-2 inhibitors can reduce pain through activity in the dorsal horn. Is it one of, how would you feel about these slides? Let's say, of course, you'll go through the explanation about blocking the calcium channels or not with COX-2 and how you avoid that, and so that you reduce the influx of calcium and therefore you reduce the action potentials of these neurons. But he allows us and helps us to focus on when he's going into details. And I think that this kind of slide, if you were to present this kind of a concept, can be, of course, I think, very rich, right? Not too much detail there. It can be much more complex than this, of course, if you wanted to do it. What about this one? How do you feel about this one? You like it? Why is it that you don't like it? Why is it that you don't like it?
Well, first I don't see the point of the picture.
Sorry?
I don't see the point of having the picture.
Of having the picture. Well, this is about osteoporosis. Isn't it nice to have a picture on osteoporosis?
No, the point is that I just focus on the bullet points. I just do not get anything in addition from it.
Okay. But you're being distracted. Actually, the point, I believe, is that not only you don't get anything additional, you're getting less. Because your attention is being drifted away from the bullet points, which hopefully is what he wants to convey. Right? Do we agree with that? The color is really awful as well. It's probably related to that loss of bladder control that the other guy was. But let us say that we change the background color. It's much better, isn't it? But nevertheless, we would still agree that the font is so small and that the picture is doing nothing there but taking me away from that. Maybe, you know, some of you will remember, certainly Gerd will remember, and Eliseo as well, a few years ago, particularly when we had those actual slides, it was common for people to have double projection. And I saw many presentations where, let's say, the right slide presents science and the left one images of landscapes, or maybe beautiful women, or maybe beautiful men. And I said, what are you trying to do here? You're asking me not to pay attention to what you're saying, right? Because you have all these pictures, and it was common to do that in those times. What about this slide? How do you feel about it? A lot of work put there anyway. Did you like it?
Not this way. If you do it slowly and you just address each point,
Okay.
And the background.
The background color should be different. There's too much animation, I believe, but you might take not everything in one go. One of the things that I feel is important, let's say, why should everything float from there to here? It doesn't make much sense and it distracts you. For instance, if you are to, let's say, highlight and animate the plaque, why don't you do it from the center because it's already there? Maybe if you want to animate the arrows, you might do it following the direction of the arrow so that it then brings you to think about it. Let's say animations, in my view, are really important. I use them a lot. I try not to overdo it, but actually, as I told you in the presentation earlier on, for instance, I believe that when you have a number of bullet points, that it is wise for you to animate each one of them for the reasons I told you as well. But some people disagree with that, you know, just have to go with your own style. But I think that some animation will help you to focus the attention, right? In the same way as, you know, calling for the next slide and asking people to, let's say, inviting people to pay attention to that. I believe it's about time. Yes.
Memorize the last bullet. Otherwise, you don't know whether you have another one.
It is true. Let's say if that's one of the tricks that you may have with the presentation. Let's say the presenter view can help you on that, but it kind of, you know, let's say sticks you to the back of the podium, which is, on the other hand, something that you'd like to avoid. And there was still another one. There you go. Okay, all is from the left. I think it's time. Is that? Lies. Now, would you like to discuss any other topics regarding this that you'd prefer? So yeah, going back to feelings and how to convey them and how we should allow them to come into place. Not long ago, my head of hospital decided to have what they call a Nobel Day. I don't know if you had that. There is an association of Nobel Prize winners, and they are quite willing to come to different places in the world and give talks that hopefully are inspiring to young clinicians and scientists and that. And so they came to our hospital as well. And I was very, very fortunate to be asked to make the introduction to the American person that had actually discovered Inbrel. And they had started it in their lab. You know, interestingly enough, he didn't get the Nobel Prize for that, which is quite remarkable, right? But, and so in introducing him, I started by looking at all his presentations that were of interest to me, that I could understand. Some of them I couldn't understand. And I decided to present to that audience. There were around 1,000 people in the audience, and I decided to present clinical cases of patients of mine that were actually had done extremely badly with destructive rheumatoid arthritis. And you know, I took some pictures and some movies from the patients, and I turned to this researcher and told him, thanks to you, sir, and to people that put their genius working on behalf of mankind, this will probably never happen again. And I got this man to cry on the stage. And you know, but it only tells you, not that, you know, the performance was great in front of that audience, but that someone who has gone through so much in terms of work and produced so much, probably along his life did not feel the touch of a person who benefited in their lives through this. And how, again, you know, I believe that this, he actually commented on that, how this touched him so deeply that he felt being close to someone who actually benefited from the work. So it's a separate dimension from the intellectual beauty and complexity of your work. It's something that gives sense to our work. This gives meaning to life, isn't it? And so I really think that if we allow ourselves to go a little bit into that, we make our presentations warmer, more inviting, more interesting to people who actually are dedicated to medicine. We then can try to blend together from the individual suffering to the higher science. And I think that, you know, in this particular case I was telling you, this is what you bring together, right? That's the meaning of the work that you had done. And I think that this is usually, in the area of medicine, quite motivating to most people, even in countries, I would say that, where being personal is impolite or is not comfortable at all. I believe that in my own experience within EULAR and with international colleagues, that many people, even from Northern European countries that tend to be colder in that approach, find it comforting when you are allowed in your conversation to, let's say, let a little bit of emotions come into the play, and that people realize how important they are to their own lives. Sorry that I can't, I'm with the blank now and I can't, but I can tell you the name. Wonderful, wonderful person. But it was actually, he then went to win the Nobel Prize through a methodology whereby they induce genetic changes in experimental animals by random, and then try to identify manifestations of the disease that are similar to human disease, and then they go through this approach with nitrogen mustard that they use to induce all these changes, and then they look into this. But this is how he got the Nobel Prize, and you just, you know, feel so humbled by being someone like that. This guy actually made the molecule in their lab before they sold it to Pfizer. And you know, this is not why you get your Nobel Prize, and you feel, well, for God's sake, you know, you're big. But then you have the big man, and he sees this old lady with very deformed hands, and you touch his heart, and that is, I think, you know, something nice to know. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your attention. I hope you found it useful. Thank you.